Hi, welcome back to English Be Good. My name's Chris, and today we're talking about the Beatles, and we're going to learn some phrasal verbs within the context of a monologue speaking about the Beatles. So, this is not so much of a band profile because I would have to go really in depth, and I think I would get carried away, first phrasal verb, and end up speaking for hours and hours. So, I'm going to keep it brief. Now, these phrasal verbs are the most common ones, and they're the ones that you need to know at B2 level. Some of them will be used also in B1, and definitely for the advanced, you should know these, okay, for the C1 level. So they're useful even if you're not doing any exams as well, because we use them a lot. And I know they often don't make sense without context. So what I'm going to do is when I'm speaking, there will be some subtitles, as you can see. I'm going to have some graphics coming on that just give you a quick definition. And with the context, I think you'll get the meaning, okay? And I suggest creating your own examples that are personal to you, because I think this is a good way to remember them. So let's maybe crack on with the monologue, another phrasal verb. To proceed. So today I'm really happy to be speaking about the Beatles because I first got into them at a really young age and I grew up with them, to be honest, because I've got a rock and roll dad who played in bands in the 60s, in the Cavern even, and he was a big influence on me musically, so we were always listening to the Beatles in the house, washing the dishes, singing along. And I've got fond memories of Beatles always being played around the house growing up. So we also lived quite close to Liverpool, and I've always had various contacts of people who have known someone in the band or have known their brother or uncle or someone. And so I've always felt quite close to the band. So this is quite special for me to be talking about them. So before the Beatles left Liverpool for the first time and headed off to Hamburg in 1960, they were very, how can we say, wet behind the ears is the expression that we use, which means they were inexperienced really. And they went over to Hamburg and played in this crazy nightlife with prostitutes and lots of dodgy characters. And they kind of grew up quite fast because they were only 17. I think George was 17, John was 19. So they were young guys. And by the time they came back, having played for 4 months, I think John was there for 4, every day they played gigs, they played concerts. And so when they came back, they were just super tight, we say, super professional and coordinated and great live performers, very professional. So they learned all of their kind of live performance skills while in Hamburg, playing in these small nightclubs where it was really hot and everyone was dancing and sweating. And anyway, George actually came back earlier from Hamburg than the others because he was too young to play. He was a minor and couldn't get a work permit because he was only 17. Anyway, the Beatles generally, in the early days of the Beatles, they got on very well together, or they got along very well. They were pretty good friends and they did everything together. Obviously, it was quite a strange life to become famous together, but they got on pretty well. And Ringo was the latest member to join the band. So in the beginning, he was like the new guy. He took over from Pete Best on the drums, who handed over the drumsticks to Ringo to drum for the rest of the career of the Beatles. So I think every album is with Ringo drumming. Pete Best was only there before they really got famous. Now, poor old Ringo seemed to be the butt of many jokes especially in the early days. If you watch the film Hard Day's Night by the Beatles, you'll see that they play quite a lot of jokes on him and they pick on him a little bit. But Ringo didn't really care. It just washed over him. He's quite laid back in general. Okay, so I think it must have been really stressful being a Beatle in the time of Beatlemania, when the Beatles were taking over the world. As wherever they went, young screaming girls would turn up to see them, and they had to usually run away and jump in a taxi and get away. So, the Beatles, I think, however, did deal with fame quite well by just being themselves. They didn't hold back when they were asked probing questions by the press, and they always came back with quick-fire, witty remarks, which got attention in the press, because I don't think before this time working class people had really had a voice in public like this, and people were fascinated to hear what they had to say, and they weren't nervous. They were just making jokes and being quite funny, really, and I think this was part of the appeal of the band. Anyway, the Beatles were together. I'm not going to talk about key albums here, but the Beatles were together for 8 years, and they produced some amazing albums and quite diverse. So if you've only heard the early Love Me Do kind of records, where it's quite 60s, the music, and there are lots of harmonies, you should look at some of the later records as well, because they get quite experimental and they've changed style quite a lot. They even came up with an alter ego, a different band profile, or it's hard to explain. An alter ego is probably the best way to say it. They created new identities under the band name Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So, like I say, they reinvented themselves and came up with new ideas all the time. Sadly, all good things must come to an end, or had to. And the Beatles broke up, or split up, and many people were heartbroken by this news and questioned whether they would have solo careers, and if they did have solo careers, would the music live up to the work that they did as a band. That's for another video. We will discuss that. Anyway, there was a lot of speculation about John and Paul having fallen out with each other. And if you look at some of the songs they had released at the time, in particular John Lennon's song, How Do You Sleep? There are a lot of comments that attack Paul in that song. And I think it's pretty obvious that they had fallen out, argued, or they were, I don't know, they went through a lot together. And I think there were some problems. However, I think by the end of it's hard to say, the end of John's life, before he was sadly murdered, before he passed away, I think they had worked things out, which is a Beatles song, we can work it out, and made up. And I think they more or less were at least on speaking terms, which is nice to hear. And I do wonder what would have happened if the Beatles had never, not broken up, because, that's one thing to wonder, I guess. But if John hadn't been killed, would the Beatles have reformed and made more records, perhaps? Would they still be playing concerts? Well, George has since died as well, but would they have gone on to play more concerts, like the Rolling Stones? It would be interesting to see. But anyway, it's impossible, so we can't do anything about that now. I think, personally, that maybe they wouldn't have recorded any more records, but they might have met for a reunion concert. But tell me what you think. Just put your ideas in the comments below. And do ask me any questions if anything is not clear, or if you're not sure about how to use some of these phrasal verbs. So I've used quite a lot of phrasal verbs. I don't want to really use any more than that in one go, because it could be confusing. So nice to have spoken to you about the Beatles today, a band that I really love. And yeah, I will see you soon for another video. Thanks for watching. My name's Chris, this is English Be Good. And one more thing, if you could please share these videos on Facebook, Instagram, press like, subscribe even. It would really help the channel to grow, and it will also keep you up to date with all the latest videos. So thanks a lot for watching, and see you soon. Bye.